Um, I'm curious about one thing. Your daughter and son were born before or after your film, like Parasite, Murder, and Rabbit, and The Brood, overall.
Yeah, my oldest daughter is 16, so she was born before I started to make these films.
And at the end 70s, early 80s, there were some movies very concerned with the idea of giving birth with generation. I think Alien by Scott, and overall the film by Lynch, Eraserhead, of course Elephant Man, and well, I wonder if there was something like a mood, and if you think, or if you thought there was something similar in this preoccupation about this idea of the obscurity of generation, the body who give birth to other bodies, or who have other bodies inside them.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. There was a festival in Germany at Hof, a small town, and they showed a lot of my films there. And when they showed Shivers, which is one of my first films, a man stood up very angry in the audience and he said, "How dare you show this? You know, it's so obvious you've stolen all of this from Alien." And I said, "But this film was made 5 years before Alien." He said, "Aha, now we know who the thief is." I think it's odd. Sometimes there does seem to be some mysterious synchronicity, you know, amongst films. When Dead Ringers finally got made, suddenly there were many films about twins for some reason, 5 or 6. And in the 10 years before that, when I was trying to make the movie, there were none. I don't know why this happens. Sometimes, of course, a film will influence other films, and then it's really a cinematic question rather than a social question. But it does happen. I don't quite know what it means, though.
You like, for instance, the films of Lynch, you know?
Yes, I like. I loved Eraserhead. I still think it's his best movie, actually. Elephant Man, to me, was very Victorian Valentine, you know, very conventional. Didn't really. It was okay, but I didn't think it was his. You know, I didn't think it was really David Lynch.
It was produced by Mel Brooks,
That's right.
who produced it to
That's right.
Your Fly. He's fascinated by this strange...
No, he only likes to produce the films of men named David. Actually, no, Mel is a very interesting man, of course. As a producer, he's very interested to do films that he cannot do as a director. When, you know, when he came to me to do The Fly, he said, you know, I don't understand the genre, but there's something about this story I really think could be fantastic. So I want you to do it because I couldn't, I don't know how. And that's very interesting for a man who is, of course, an actor, a writer, a director himself, to be able to do that.
You told I was very interested in this sort of movies then. Now it's 10 years I wanted to do this movie about twins. But I think in your movies this question, but also in this movie actually is very connected, these things, because at the beginning there are immediately sex, immediately the body, the decomposition of body, and so is perfectly introduced, if one would say, in your work in your about these twins, these dead ringers. There is something like a recall with two scanners. There was something like two brothers, two men who had exactly similar power. You thought to this question?
No, I've never made that connection. But I think it's legitimate to do that. I mean, I think there are connections. But it must be unconscious ones, because I hadn't really thought of that before. But I am always interested in, of course, when you talk about brothers or sisters, you're talking about people who are related. And what do we mean by related? We mean somehow by blood, by genetics, by the body. And it's interesting to see how that relates to the development of the mind as well. Are they also connected, or are they not? You know, how much influence? So I think that, yes, I think it's legitimate to say that there is a connection between those two.
You worked in the same time, I think, on these two projects, The Ringers Twins and Total Recall, I think. Total Recall is from a novel by Dick.
It's actually from a short story.
From short story by Dick. You are fascinated generally by Dick, or is casual?
No, it's casual. I mean, he was an interesting man. I think very strange man. Maybe very self-destructive. I'm not sure. I've read some things about him, and he's very fascinating. But I have a problem with a lot of science fiction in terms of the quality of the writing. You know, not most of the science fiction writers I read when I was very young, I cannot read now, because the writing, the ideas are interesting, but the writing itself is not very good, and I have great trouble with that. And Dick is very uneven. This short story, it's not really a good short story, but there's a wonderful idea there. And this is why that movie has had so much trouble getting born also, because there's a wonderful concept for the beginning, but there's no ending, and it's very difficult to find the ending. So that's why Total Recall is a project that no one has yet made. There have been 6 or 7 directors who've tried, me and Fred Skepsey, Richard Rush, Bruce Beresford, and now I hear that Paul Verhoeven is going to make it or try to make it. We'll see what happens.
And there is 3 short, I think: The Victim, The Lie Chair, and The Italian Machine.
Yes.
And I wanted to know something about this.
Well, I don't know how illuminating it'll be without having seen them, but
I hope.
The two, The Victim and The Lie Chair, were the first television shows that I did. They were on videotape, and I did them quite a long time ago. And it was very interesting because they were not written by me. And I really did them because I was interested to see what it was like to use videotape. Then it was 2-inch videotape. And to use, to shoot in the video style, which was not to edit, but to use many cameras and to rehearse the whole show from beginning to end like a play, and then have the cameras cutting while you shoot, switching from camera to camera.
It's you are directing in the.
That's right. Yeah, and I know that Coppola sort of tried to do that with film and video for One from the Heart, but I don't know why, because it's not very precise, and you are very distant from your actors because you are up in the machine talking over a microphone, and it's somewhat frustrating because you can't be close to what's going on, and you don't have the precision, you don't have the chance to do things many times and then to edit. It was interesting, It was almost like doing live television or something in the 50s. But it's not my favorite way to make a film. An interesting experiment.
The genre, what was the genre?
It's sort of psychological drama, really.
Because absolutely different. It's short, The Victim and Lecture, probably for a peep show. It's incredible in this.
Yes, well, it was called, but the TV series was called Peep Show.
So there is a mistake. Probably for a peep show, yes.
No, that's a big mistake, yeah.
And Italian Machine also, it was a TV.
Yes, but that was shot in film, 16 millimeter, more like a film. And it was about a motorcycle, an Italian motorcycle, Ducati, about some motorcycle enthusiasts who tried to steal a motorcycle that is owned by a man who bought it just because he thought it was beautiful and who put it in his living room as a sculpture. And the motorcycle enthusiasts think that that's bad. It should be out liberated onto the streets, you know. But it's a small thing. But I love motorcycles and racing cars and so on. So this was my, you know, a film.
It's yours.
I did write this, yeah. This one I wrote.
You prefer human, machine, or motorcycles, cars?
Well, they're different, but it's interesting to think. I mean, when we make a machine, we are, in a way, it's our version of the human body, you know? I mean, in a sense, the human body is a machine, as William Burroughs has called it, the soft machine. And it's interesting, when you open up a machine, you see the mind of the man who designed it. You know, and I do that. I enjoy working on the motors of cars and motorcycles and so on. I think it's, you have the whole history of man there, the technology, the design, the rationality. You can have designs that are brilliant and inspired, and you can have some that are very ordinary and not very interesting. So it's a philosophical adventure, really, to work on a machine, I think.
When you worked about Total Recall, Philip Dick was already dead.
No, I think he was still alive, actually. I think he died shortly after that.
You didn't work with it?
No.
With him?
No. I think the original screenplay was written by Ron Shusett, who was one of the producers of Alien, in fact. And that's what I was presented with.
And now you are working about another of your, I think, old and fascinating project, Naked Lunch. Mm-hmm. And you are working with Burroughs, or? Well,
we've been talking about it for maybe 5 years. I think I met Burroughs 5 or 6 years ago, and with Jeremy Thomas, who produced The Last Emperor and a lot of other films. And I want to do something that has to do with Burroughs and with that book. But it's really very difficult. It's really an impossible book to put on the screen. So I have to transform it somehow so that it can be on the screen, and I'm not sure yet how to do that.
But you are going to do now, or not? Is your next movie?
Well, only if I can figure out how to do it. I mean, this is always the dangerous thing. I could spend a year writing a screenplay and then at the end say, this is no good. It's possible. Then you have to start with something else from the beginning.
You are generally fascinated by Burroughs, or is only this one novel?
Oh no, with Burroughs it's everything. I mean, his life as well. A very unusual man, and really one of the founders of the Beat generation with Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. And because of that, one of the foundations of what happened in the 60s, you know, the whole hippie movement and everything, Burroughs was really at one of the founders of all of that in a strange way. And I find all of that very fascinating. But I don't yet know how to put that on paper and then on screen. I haven't figured that out yet.
I think it's so fascinating also for the 80s, Burroughs with
Yes.
all his novels and short stories about this pre-recorded, this cut, this mixed visions. I think is now television. The work of the television now is absolutely already narrated in this.
Yeah.
I'm very fascinated by
it. But to do that on film, that's something I don't want to. Well, it's a whole. But I think he's a very important writer, and I'd like to do something that conveys some of that through cinema. But I don't yet know how.
I saw Videodrome many times, and I think is something between, let's say, between Dick and Burroughs.
Well, I think that's fair. I think that's very fair to say. Yeah.
What do you think of real life television? Who is now, I mean. Crime watching shows in the States. I don't know if it's also in Canada.
It's very strange, isn't it? But it's really what I think it's just even more of what I was talking about in Videodrome, that reality is being replaced by another reality that's a video, media, television reality, which for some people is more real than anything else. And it is real. People make political decisions based on media reality. What's happening in places like, let's say, Beirut, Lebanon, the media reality is quite different from what the people experience who live there. And yet, for most of the people in the world, what they see on television, what they hear on the radio, what they read in the paper, that is reality. There is no other one. It suddenly becomes two separate realities, distanced from each other. It's quite strange.
Don't you think that perhaps, that you can think that perhaps the reality is already replaced by another reality? I don't know, I'm very fascinated in Dead Ringers by the fact that the film is quite natural, quite no monsters, some instruments, some little, but you are continuously thinking that perhaps all these are, I don't know, robots. It's something in your other movies that these bodies are going to explode, perhaps. Now, actually, they don't explode, but that something is forever mutate. That the mutation is already gone.
Yes.
I'm talking to David Cronenberg, and I don't know if it's a machine, if it's who is actually.
Yes. Well, from my side, I think there is another David Cronenberg walking around that many people think is the real one, and maybe he is. Because people read, they think they know me. Of course, this happens to anybody in the media, but it's the first time it's happened to me. It's very interesting. People think they know me, they know about my life, and they don't. But they know about this other one, the media one, the one in the magazines and on television. So I believe, though, that we are, we think that our physical existence is stable, relatively stable, but I think it isn't. I think the body is like a hurricane. It's constantly changing and shifting, and it's only an illusion that it's the same day after day after day. Really, it's never the same from one moment to the next. So that's why the question of identity becomes even more compelling. We feel that we are someone who continues, who has a history, will have a future. But you can't prove that. It's impossible to prove that. And yet we feel it to be true, that it is reality. So I'm very interested in that. And that's one of the themes, of course, of Dead Ringers in particular. Two bodies. Is it two bodies? Is it two identities? I'm not sure.
Videodrome was influenced by your work on TV, for TV?
Not really.
And in this movie you seem very fascinated by the idea of snuff movies,
Well, I think that's another false, well, not false, alternate reality. Because I don't think there ever was a snuff movie. Many people have tried to prove it, that there was or is, and no one has ever seen it. I think it's a myth. But the idea is so fascinating that it might as well be real. You know, it doesn't matter if there ever was a real South American, Colombian snuff movie. But I have James Woods' character say, you know, why go to the trouble of actually killing somebody? You can fake it. It's, you know, it's cheaper, it's more convincing, and it's less dangerous. But what interested me more was how the public wanted, I think the public wanted it to be real. You know, while saying how horrible it was, how terrible, I think they really wanted it to be real. I found that very interesting. Why did they want it so badly to be real? You often find this, you know, that the strangest and the most horrible things, the most bizarre, the most sexually perverse things, people, by spending a lot of energy in saying how bad it is and talking about the implications of it, they keep it alive. They want it to be there. It's an interesting thing that I notice, and I think in the case of snuff movies, I think that was a very spectacular case of that.
At the end, we saw some snuff movies. I don't know, the Challenger who exploded in TV direct, also Reagan being near assassinated.
Yeah, I mean, that's really a wonderful observation, because it's true that it's on the news that you see the real snuff movie. Snuff TV is very popular. I've seen people commit suicide on TV. I've seen people jumping to their death on TV, and yet no one ever calls it that. You know, they think it must be some strange South American movie with prostitutes being strangled and so on. I'm not sure. I mean, it feels that it's very perverse, and I'm not sure that it is. I'm not sure that it is. Does it distance us from a reality, or is it another kind of, or is it involving us? You know, when people see the Challenger explode and cry in their homes, is that bad, or is that a kind of communion that you can only have through some medium like television? I don't know. I really don't know. But it's very powerful, though, and it is changing everything.
In Dead Ringers, there is one scene who's very hard to me, hardcore scene. Just when there is Genevieve Bujold who kisses or perhaps bites in Dream, I think, the strange organ join. And well, actually is a real hardcore movie sequence, I think. And I think you are quite fascinated by by pornography and also hardcore movies. Thinking to your previous movies, thinking to Marilyn Chambers in Rabbit, And I think you know, you knew, of course, she was
Yes.
a hardcore
Yeah.
star.
Yeah, well, of course, I think most artists are always drawn to those things that are covered and hidden, and therefore they are, in one way or another, drawn to what is forbidden, what is taboo. You can't, if you're a serious artist, you cannot accept taboo, something that you must not look at, you must not think about, you must not touch. You say, no, I must. The more you say no, the more I say yes. And of course, sexuality is, in many forms and different varieties, is one of the most taboo subjects. Gynecology, I mean, I had, one of the reasons I had so much trouble financing Dead Ringers was not just because it was an art movie or a difficult movie or a bizarre movie or a tragic movie, but because it was gynecology. And when you think of it, despite the fact that every woman you know goes to a gynecologist and every man knows some woman who goes to a gynecologist, you don't ever see it in film. I can't remember seeing a character in a film who's a gynecologist or scenes in a gynecological office. It's very rare. Why, you know? So, of course, and pornography is, even in cultures which allow it, like America, it's still very taboo, very forbidden. It has, and that immediately draws me to it. I mean, just that fact makes me interested in it.
Yes, apart of that, the idea of the difference between pornography and official culture, I thought, when the first time I saw Rabbit, I thought very fascinating that in a film about, in a movie about, like as ever, about bodies, about something like cancer, something that the star, the female star, was a porno star, and not used as a porno star, but.
Yeah. Well, here we have to, it's interesting to know that she's a porno star, but in fact, that wasn't part of my decision to use her in the film. It was a really very practical question. We wanted an actress who had some name value, someone that people would write about and who would perhaps draw some people to see her in the film. But we couldn't afford a well-known actress. So it was really Ivan Reitman, who produced that film's idea to use Marilyn Chambers, because he had read that she was interested in trying to do a straight movie. So really it was a very practical question, and when I auditioned her, I wasn't thinking of her at all. In fact, I have never seen her porno films. I really just approached her as an actress to see whether she was right for the role or not. It's so, you know, creatively for me, that wasn't really part of the equation, I must say. Although it's amusing and it's interesting to connect that now with the films that I've made since then, and I don't mind that. But the fact that she was a porno star really was not part of my choice, you know, to have her in the film.
Perhaps it's more interesting. Perhaps.
Oh yeah.
I know.
Oh yes.
And, Genevieve Bujold is a choice. You knew her because
of course, she's a Canadian actress, and so she's maybe more familiar to me from her early films than for most people, because I remember the films that she made when she was living in Canada, you know, small films, Canadian films. before she became a star, you know, and before she went to live in Malibu, which is where she'd been living for 17 years, I think. But I've always thought she was a wonderful actress. A fantastic voice, texture, you know. And as she's gotten older, she's gotten even better, you know, more interesting. So, really, this role, I mean, I thought this is for Geneviève. This is my chance to offer her a role in the movie. And I did have to convince her to do it. She was worried, you know. The first scene in the movie, she's in the stirrups, you know, and on the examination table in a gynecologist's office and so on. But finally, she realized that it would be a good film and that she wanted to be in it. I'm very glad she did.
I don't know if you saw the movie actually, Obsession by Barbara. It's very strange to find her, and in my memory, after the René film, then after Obsession, to have her here in this film was very obsessive, I think. So there's some strange connections. What do you think of commercials, television commercials, and commercials as a cinema genre?
Of course, because I've never directed a commercial, I don't really know what the experience of it is, but I know that there are many famous directors like Martin Scorsese and Fellini who have directed commercials, and many well-known cameramen who really enjoy shooting commercials because, of course, as a technical exercise, it could be very fascinating, very complex, and it doesn't take a lot of time. That's the other thing. I think there are some very good commercials which are very artful. Can you really call them art? I don't know. I mean, maybe in time we will see them as art. I know that a lot of people who do commercials say, yes, the commercial is the art form of the 80s or the 70s or whatever it is. I think the problem is, of course, that they are commercials. They are there to sell something. For me, political films are never really art. A certain kind of political film that exists only to sell politics, a brand of politics, Marxist, fascist, whatever, it really is propaganda. There's a sense in which it cannot really be art for me. And so I think in the same way for commercials, they can be fascinating technical exercises, but I don't really think they can be art. This is a very big discussion, of course, because you have to then define what is art, what is not art. Andy Warhol, you know, it's
all the stuff. Yes,
it's a big discussion. But I'm interested to watch commercials. I sometimes enjoy it, and it's very interesting to see commercials from other countries. You become very used to, in America, or Canada, to a certain kind of commercial. And then you see some from Japan. It's fantastic to see, you know, or Italy. It's quite different. So culturally, as something that can be very revealing culturally, that definitely a commercial is maybe a better thing to look at than a TV series, you know.
What do you think of commercials popping out between one scene and the other of a movie? In some way, like little monsters popping out in your first movies. No, commercials in TV. Yes, between one scene and the other of the movie, you know, by Scorsese perhaps, or by you. I saw Scanner some last year. It was a nice score, not in RAI, not in national, not in public television. It was with some shows, some commercials in. It was quite interesting, but because every time it was, because the film is very concentrated, very hard. So
It turns it into something else. It becomes a different experience. But then, of course, television is a different experience than cinema anyway. I tend now to watch films only on pay TV in America.
You prefer?
Where you see them uncut and complete. But it's still different because people, it's like reading a book now. You know, you tape a movie and then you watch it. You watch a part, then you stop, and the next day you watch some more. You have your favorite scene. I think video has really changed, maybe for the better, but has altered cinema, you know, because people know they have access to it. You can own your own film, which is something not too long ago that was impossible, unbelievable. You know, unless you had 35 millimeter projectors, you couldn't do it, and a library, fantastic. I think that is very good, to have access, like a book, to film. So in a way, I think that the day of films shown on TV with commercials is going to be very short. It will be dead soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also is dying also in Italy. But you have many video. But you are worried when you know that your movie is going on TV, or also when you see the cassette of your movie who is going in this little or larger screen, but in an electronic screen and not on the big.
No, it doesn't bother me. What bothers me is to make sure that it looks right. For Dead Ringers, for the first time, I went to Detroit to oversee the transferring of the film from negative to video master, because we had to retime the whole scene. Every shot is different on video, and it becomes a different film. For my other films, I was very unhappy with The Fly and The Dead Zone on TV because the color was wrong, the darkness, it was too bright. And I didn't understand why it happened. Now I know, because some technician who maybe never saw the film in the theater decided, oh, I don't like this, is too dark, make it bright. But once you've successfully managed to control the way it looks, I think it's a new life, you know, it's different. And I want my films to be good on television. I've always composed them. For example, I don't shoot in widescreen, and one of the reasons I don't is because I know that it will never look right on video, on television, if you do that. And I know that, for better or for worse, more people will see my films on television than will ever see it in the cinema. I think it's probably now true for almost every film. Though it's foolish to deny that. You have to accept it. It's the reality now. So you might as well make sure that your film looks good on video. You can't say, I make my film only for the cinema and I don't care what happens next. If you do that, I think it's a big mistake.